Give you a moment to connect to sound. Hello. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1150th New Social Environment Conversation. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the extreme pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Tabboo and Pamela Sneed. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Tabboo renders his subjects in a direct, intuitive style that he terms emotional realism, suspending figurative elements against dreamlike color fields. Working primarily in acrylic, the artist often draws subjects from his surroundings, depicting cityscapes, friends, or flora and fauna in imaginative still lives or tableaux. He also paints large panoramic works and site-specific murals that recall the painted backdrops he made for performances in the 1980s and 90s. While performing regularly himself, Tabboo has designed numerous event flyers, posters, and album covers featuring his signature curvilinear text. Tabboo lives in New York. And our host today, Pamela Sneed, is a New York-based poet, performer, and visual artist. She's the author of Imagine Being More Afraid of Freedom Than Slavery, Funeral Diva, which was featured in the New York Times and won the 2021 Lambda Lesbian Poetry Award, and other books. She's a 2023 Creative Capital Awardee in Literature and has also won the Black Queer Art Mentorship Award and a BOFO residency. Sneed has published in the Paris Review, Frieze, and other publications. She's a professor at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, where she's been a guest artist for several years, and she teaches across disciplines at Columbia University's MFA program. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Pamela to get us started with a lot of gratitude.
Yay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome our guest of honor, Tabboo. Yay. Okay, first tell us where you are. Yes, yes, we need thank you for the kisses. Where are you?
I am 2 weeks away from turning 66. I am literally sitting in front of a painting by Jane Dixon of the Verrazano Bridge. That's not my painting, but I do paint bridges. And I'm at Karma Gallery, where we are both artists who show at Karma Gallery, and in New York City, where it's frigid. Not as frigid.
Yes, it very much is. So wait a minute. So we have to start. You have concurrent exhibitions at two
Yes.
spaces? Yes.
It's actually
Four
one,
galleries, you said?
two, three, four. It's five spaces, two gallery, five spaces of old
Mhm.
work when I was in my 20s, like in the 19 from 1980 like 1992, kind of that little section, which is like 40 years ago, 40, I don't know, like a long time ago. Many of our audience weren't even born then. Some of them might. Oh, I see Kiara is a little had been around. But yeah, it's a long time ago. So to see all this stuff up on the gallery walls, some of them have been in shows throughout the decades. And but this is what we had to represent some of my early work, just to show that, when the internet sort of took over, it sort of erased a lot of history that came before it. And so they're reintroducing me to the art world, to the kids, to the curators, to the museum, to the galleries, because a lot of that stuff, a lot of the galleries and curators and magazines and everything that I did before no longer even exist. I exist. I've outlived them all. So history is told by the person who outlives it all. So I'm showing you
Wow.
my work. Yeah.
So
So
I
it's,
was looking through your bio and basically we have a lot of overlapping things, right? So one, we're both from Massachusetts.
oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Where were you born? Where were you
I
born?
was born in Malden, Mass. Don't tell
Malden.
anybody.
My friend Mark Morrison was born in Malden, Mass. Also, that's where the Boston Strangler was born. Did you know that? He always used
And
to
could
say
you
he used to say that's my father. The Boston.
and where were you from? Worcester? Was it
I was
Worcester?
born in Worcester, but I grew up in Cherry Valley. There was no hospital. There wasn't even a stop sign in Cherry Valley. Cherry Valley was very rural outside of Worcester, behind the Worcester airport, behind in the middle of the woods on a dead end road that hadn't been paved until I was like about 10 years old. So I was born in 1959. the year the music died. You know that song, "The Day the Music Died." That was the day that Buddy Holly, Big Bopper, Richie Valens, and the plane went down and crashed. And I always say, uh, the news of their death pushed me off the covers of the newspapers to announce the arrival of my birth.
Wow, that's beautiful. And so do you have brothers and sisters? And
Yes, my sister unfortunately died in COVID. I
well,
have
I'm
two
sorry.
brothers that are still alive, married. They both have kids. Their kids have kids. I mean, I'm old. Yeah. Mhm.
And what made you move to New York?
The art world. I was always told this is where you want to make it in the art world, you need to get to New York. It's the center of the world. It's the center of the art world. I guess if this was the turn of the last century, before this, last 2 centuries ago, I would have moved to Paris. That was the center of the art world. Now it's still, I believe, New York City is the center of the art world. So I moved here, unknowing what it really was, really. So when I
Oh, can
came,
you say more about that?
well, when I moved here in 1982, uh, just as a comparison that maybe some of our younger readers can visualize, when they show like the Pacific Palisades, like decimated by the fires, that's what New York City looked like, decimated by just time. It was in every building for blocks and blocks and blocks were torn down. The only cars on the street had been stripped and set on fire. The only people on the street were drug dealers. I mean, it was a wild, scary, dark, but very exciting time, very exciting time. And at the same time, it was sort of a safe haven for the queer community, for the art community, and for the punk community, and the outsider world could come to Manhattan. I used to say, they used to say, oh, they should take all those freaks and put them on an island. They did. It was called Manhattan. So everyone came to Manhattan. Yes, everyone would come to Manhattan, especially downtown, which meant below 14th Street and above Canal Street, kind of. And it was filled. Every single person was an artist, basically, if they weren't a Ukrainian restaurateur. So it was all artists. And so when I moved here, I moved right into like, fantasy world for an artist. Yeah.
So you always knew you wanted to be an artist, or
I
was
always,
there like some turning point?
oh no, I always was an artist. Right from the
Mhm.
beginning, I didn't realize that's what you called it. Just like I was always gay, queer, I didn't know that's what you called it. Everyone puts labels on things. Like even like when I went to elementary school, I immediately started like taking the construction paper and cutting out and making wall murals on the bulletin boards in all the classes. I would raise my hand and say, can I be excused? I need to go to the other room and do the bulletin board. And I would like decorate sort of, I would do art pieces in all the rooms right from the beginning. And so my mother definitely encouraged me, brought me to like art classes and stuff. And I was like a professional puppeteer, which like many people, like even John Waters, where I wrote the plays, played all the characters, male and female. I designed the sets, painted the sets, designed the costumes, made built the stage, and did all that stuff.
And did I see somewhere that you have collaborated with Machine Dazzle?
I love Machine Dazzle. I'm trying to think. I must have, because we did a lot of things together. Was Machine Dazzle anything to do with the Black Lips? I know I did things with Black Lips. I
Okay.
know recently Machine Dazzle had a great exhibition at the Museum of Art and Design. And I went to the opening and I sort of used that because I also make movies, and my recent movie, it hasn't been released yet. It's called Valentino, Chic as Fuck. It's about not the designer Valentino, the first movie star, Rudolph Valentino from the Silent Age. So I used his big opening as a backdrop for the opening of his big movie called The Chic. So we've collaborated in that way, but he's never made any of my outfits. I make
Okay.
I make my own outfit, but I love
Well, yeah, so it looks like okay, we share a lot of similarities, not just coming from Massachusetts, but you work at the intersection of performance, text, visual art. You make textiles. Now you're talking about film, puppeteer. You're truly a mixed media artist. I mean, is that something that you always did? Was there a moment that you arrived that you said, I want to work and all these mediums. Is
I
it organic or
totally organic, totally organic. In fact, one of my big hits was a song, a rap song I wrote for this Wigstock movie to explain like what the gay culture is, what the drag culture is, and it was called "It's Natural." It's natural. So to me, the way I do and the thing I do and everything, it's very natural. It just comes to me naturally from the universe, from God, from whatever, you know. So it's always been just a natural thing for me to do all those things. And it's almost hard for me to like when I produce plays, I produce many plays, and to let some people do the backdrop maybe, or someone else to write some of the lines, or you know, improvise. I like when I work in groups. I'm not sort of a dictator. I like to let people come in and add things to it. I'm always open to fresh ideas, which is very much nature. Like you can't, you could plan an event and then it rains. You know, you always have to be ready to influx, I guess. You know, influx.
And can you stop on this image right here? This is really beautiful. Is this a mural? Can you tell us about it?
This was back in the 80s. Well, let's be just pre-preface. When I was growing up, like when I was born in the 50s, but like it wasn't until I think the mid 60s that being gay was considered a mental disease, a mental disease. And I don't think it came off the books until like the mid 70s as being homosexual was a mental disease. And a lot of people that I know that are like 10, 15, 20 years older than me, they were sent to mental institutions and given electric shock therapy to change them, to cure them from being that. You know, and at the same time, it was still illegal to be homosexual up until, believe it or not, 2003. Isn't that wild? Anyway,
Right.
the kids now they're saying, what? They're going to take away my marriage rights? Me growing up, there was no rights at all. But that didn't mean I wasn't going to be who I was going to be. So I was always going to be like where I was going to be. And when I moved to New York, everyone I knew was in the similar thought. So as far as doing drag or drag shows or being gay, it was always in nightclubs. Like there weren't really community centers. Yeah, there probably was the LGBT center on 13th Street, but there weren't just like places you could be queer outside in the public eye. And so there was a park in the East Village that was across the street from this nightclub called the Pyramid, where a lot of drag queens did shows. And there was a big band shell that they built. The city actually built back in the 30s when I think Roosevelt was more socialist, and they had public band shows so people could do like union workers could have their meetings outside in public. Anyway, we decided to do this outdoor drag show event, almost like Lollapalooza or what's that thing Beyonce did? I forget what she did. She did that.
I don't know. I don't follow Beyonce that much.
Oh, well, she did a big outdoor concert that they were doing. Anyway, this was a huge outdoor concert, and this was one of the backdrops, one of the first backdrops at inside the band show. So this was outside, and that's why it's on canvas. I had been making backdrops like this. Like I told you, when I was a kid, I did backdrops for all my plays and puppet shows. But when I came to New York City, I started designing backdrops for nightclubs where huge bands would perform, like Nirvana and Red Hot Chili Peppers and all these big Butthole Surfers. All these bands would perform, and I would do the backdrops, and I would change them every week. And it was on like seamless paper, like the big photographers use big white seamless. I would paint them on that, and then just tear them down and do another one each week. So there must have been like, well, that was like 10 years of how many weeks? 52 weeks times 10, whatever, 500. There were like 500 of these huge backdrops, all done with glitter and black and white, all painted, and none of them exist. They haven't stood the test of time. But this one was done on canvas to be outside for an outside drag performance called Wigstock, which was a play on words of Woodstock. You know, Woodstock was one of the first times all the rock musicians got together in the 60s. So this was the first time all the drag queens were outside in the
So
80s.
well, do you feel like some of your work like embodies like carnival, like principles of
Oh yeah.
carnival like festivity
Oh
and
yeah. I used to
um,
work in carnivals as a kid, doing puppet shows in carnivals. They would pay
mhm.
me. I remember one guy, he was a real trickster. He said, we already paid you. Because it was like an Oktoberfest. I would eat, like they would feed me. I was like 14. I was in professional art world. working it as like 12. By the time I was 14, I was already on the covers of newspapers and things. But I worked at a carnival where they were feeding me German chocolate cake, and I would be high as a kite with all the sugar. At the end, they were like, my mother was kind of my manager, and she goes, "Okay, where's the $500 for the week?" And they would go, he ate it in chocolate cake. But my mother was a tough broad, and she said, "Give him the money." So they eventually did give me the money. Yeah, but I did work in carnivals. I recently saw the Bob Dylan biopic, and he pretended, he told everyone, "Oh yeah, I worked in the carnivals." I really did. I really did start in the carnivals. Yeah.
I really like that biopic actually. I mean, I have some
I
issues with it,
love
but
it.
I actually thought that, they did a great job. And who is it as Pete Seeger, I thought was really phenomenal. So, okay, so there were a lot of personalities around the time that you were on the Lower East Side, that you came to the Lower East Side. So I'm thinking about Keith Haring.
Oh
I'm
yes,
thinking
yes.
about David Wojnarowicz.
Oh yeah, I knew them
I'm
all.
thinking yeah,
They
yeah. And
weren't.
did you have relationships with them? Were there any, like, was there like cross-pollination, kind of thing?
Oh, definitely. Like for instance, one of the pieces in my show is a portrait I did of Keith Haring, where we did run the show that was, speaking of carnivals, it was like a Coney Island carnival, and my job that night was to play like the caricaturist at the carnivals, and people would sit down and I do their portrait, and
Mm.
Haring's one of the people, and he goes, "Oh, I'll buy that from you." And I said, "No, no, I'm going to keep this." I kept that one, and it's in that. There actually is a maybe right here, number 50. Yeah, see? And I was dead broke at the time. And so it just painted on cardboard with a ballpoint pen or something. Yeah, but that's Keith Haring. I knew Keith Haring, David Wojnarowicz. Yep, yep, yep. The thing with them,
Have you met Madonna? Did you meet Madonna?
Madonna was, how about this? Madonna was the bartender at my first solo art show because we had there was a wonderful man named Martin Burgoyne. He worked at bartender at the Pyramid, but he also ran this little nightclub. It was really like a small piece of pizza. It was called Lucky Strike on Stuyvesant, and I forget what's there now, and he ran a nightclub. But back in the day, all the nightclubs showed art. It was an art performance nightclub dance place. Everything was like that. It was a mix. It was a mix up. Now everything's so separated. Anyway, so
Well, yeah.
because he was the bartender at this thing, that night of my opening, he was the gallerist, So he had his friend Madonna be the bartender. So she was the
Oh my
bartender
God.
because he was her manager too. And at that point, it was her song, "Everybody Come On, Dance and Sing." Now that hadn't been released yet, and they were trying to promote her as a black girl from the Bronx. So they didn't release
Ah,
a picture of her as a white girl from Detroit.
right, right. Well, that was really funny because somebody the other day was talking about hearing Madonna's voice on like black stations,
Yeah.
and that they didn't that people didn't feel like she had the resonance of like a black person. And then when they saw the picture of her, they were like, "Oh, okay, it makes sense." But
Yeah,
like,
the producer of Like a Virgin is one of my big art collectors.
oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you interacted with a lot of people. I mean, we haven't even talked about like RuPaul and
Oh yeah,
like Lady
RuPaul.
Bunny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you read RuPaul's first book that he did with Disney, I forget the name of that publishing company. He actually says, when I came to New York, he came up to do a show at one of the nightclubs I worked at, and he saw that me particularly, was one of the people working like as a drag queen, as a gay artist, and you could actually survive on that. Me doing the backdrops, he was like, "Wow, I'm moving to New York." So he moved to New York and then didn't make it, moved away. He's back and forth many times. I've been on his show and performed with him many times. I'm in a lot of his videos. Yeah, RuPaul's great. At that point,
Are you still performing? Are you still doing drag performance?
well, I don't necessarily do drag, but I do. Like I said, I make movies. I make movies uh, and Instagram videos and reels and that kind of stuff. Oh yeah. Once you're a performer, once you're an artist, I don't think you can really stop. You can't really stop. Like, will you ever stop
Um,
poetry? No.
so you
No.
coined this phrase emotional realism to describe your work. So what is that? How did you
Well,
arrive at that?
how did I arrive with that? That was probably one of those off the cuff things I said when I was 20 years old. As far as realism, like strangely enough, a lot of the things I paint are real. And people are like, "Really?" no one really looked like that. But back in the day, people did look like that. When they see my paintings of like New York City, does that really look like that? Like, yeah, it really does. Of course, it's seen through my eyes. So I have what do they call that? Artistic license to do things through my own eyes. But it's very realism. And as far as emotional, yeah, why not? I think that's why people like my art. It sort of gets them. It's like, wow, this guy's really feeling what he's into. It's not just some calculated thing that they studied about, It's sort of, it comes from my heart.
So we should backtrack a minute about like, Keith Haring, because I know HIV AIDS was also a really big deal. It impacted, I mean, I've written Funeral Diva, and I wrote about coming of age, during like the first wave of the AIDS era in the late 80s and early 90s. And that sort of like laid the foundation for a lot of like my work. And so how did AIDS impact you? And I was glancing through the slideshow, and I saw some work about HIV AIDS, and I was really happy to see that. So like, how did that time impact your work, and what can you say about that?
Well, as I look back on a lot of this stuff and I see my portraits of some of the people, and almost everybody is dead from AIDS or drug addiction, or maybe they couldn't afford Manhattan, moved away. But for the most part, I watched, I would say 98% of everybody I knew, and I was very popular. I worked at every single nightclub. I knew everybody. And so I would say 98% of everybody I knew died of AIDS. And back in the day, you would get the diagnosis and they give you 2 weeks, sometimes 2 months. And you would know in that time, you were going to slowly lose all your body weight. You were going to get covered in these lesions called sarcosis, sarcoma. You're going to, your family's going to say, oh no, he's not gay. He has pneumonia. It was all this kind of shit. And it was scary. It was almost like, I guess like, when I was a kid, the Vietnam War, I'm old. So in the 60s, if you were a man, you were going to be drafted. You don't volunteer, it wasn't a volunteer. You were going to be drafted to go to Vietnam and kill Asian families and burn them to the ground. It was like, I'm not doing that, but you didn't really have a choice. It was like, oh my God, I'm next. Luckily for me, by the time I turned 18, they stopped the draft. And I was like, but then, and basically everyone from a lot of people from that generation were killed in Vietnam. And so the same thing with AIDS, that whole bohemian downtown artistic thing, which was very much queer, the big stars, it's all, but died of AIDS. And I would watch people one by one get the diagnosis and die of AIDS. Now, I started having unprotected, anonymous gay sex in the 70s, which is when they say it all started. So I never even bothered to get tested because I just figured I probably must have it. I'll just wait until I'm covered with psychosis and I'm down to 15 pounds. And when I finally did get tested in 2002, I was down to 5 T cells. Now, I don't know if you know about AIDS, like the immune system, you're supposed to have like 500,000 T cells, and I was down to 5. So I luckily escaped it. And by 1997 is when the drugs came in that could, save your life. So everyone before 1997 died. So everyone after 1997. So a lot of this work is before 1997. So while all my artists that you see in this show, the AIDS epidemic is one by one. Sometimes you go to like 2 memorial services a week. You couldn't keep up. And it was very traumatic. So there's different ways you deal with the trauma. And I think the way I dealt with it, and a lot of the queens and the dealt with it, was let's entertain the troops. You know what I mean? Let's put on a party. Let's celebrate life, because tomorrow is not promised to anybody. So a lot of my art is fun, kooky, colorful, controversial. It's like, what are they going to do? They've already, you know what I mean? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. So
Beautiful.
that's
Um,
that's Chris Christopherson, Janis Joplin saying that. But you
right.
know, so
And
just
well, I have a couple of questions. Like, one, were you also impacted by the civil rights movement? Like, sort of like,
oh,
landing. landing in New York and like the civil rights movement happened, and then you're at the beginning of like sort of like the queer rights movement, and
I know some
yeah,
friends that were actually at that March on Washington. I know a couple friends that were they remember they were swimming in the reflecting pool during Martin Luther King's speech. So I know people that went there, but and I think Martin Luther King said like gay rights are civil rights. So and I love the
right,
fact that the big civil rights guy was gay. You know, he was a gay guy, right?
right.
But
Oh, Bayard Rustin.
yeah, Bayard
Right.
Rustin. Oh,
Yeah, there's a really beautiful film on what is it on Netflix that Coleman Domingo. Do you know Coleman? He's also another downtown performer who's like really made it into Hollywood and basically is up for an Oscar.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah, yeah. He
yeah,
played him. He played him on TV. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so who are some of like your influences? Because I was like looking through and I see like Matisse and Chagall. There's like sort of like the color palette, the sort of like whimsical and the fantasy stuff.
I
Um,
love modern art. I love, there's modern art and then there's contemporary art. I'm not really a big fan of contemporary art because it's so much overthinking. I think modern art is more just like emotional realism, like the colors, like Van Gogh or Matisse or Picasso or, you know, incredible. I just love all that Paris, turn of the century incredibleness. I've always loved that. And at the same time, the 1960s, I love the 1960s. Oh, the AIDS killed Farouk Bomi Balsara. That's his government name, Farouk Bomi Balsara. But his showbiz name was Freddie Mercury. Yeah. He died of AIDS in the arms of Elton John, by the way. And Lori
oh,
Schleicherberger killed herself because Ethel, she's one of my big drag mothers. His real name was James Roy, but I never knew that until after he died. But Ethel was this queen who had a huge, back when no one had a tattoo, he had a huge tattoo of himself as an angel in high heels playing the accordion on his back. So he was incredible. And yeah, he
oh,
was helping a friend who was dying of AIDS. He had to move. He moved to Staten Island to help nurse him as he slowly died and rotted away from AIDS. And while he was watching that, he goes, I can't do this. I can't do that. So instead, he killed himself. And he was a big dramatic theatrical queen. So he slit his wrists and laid in a warm bathtub like the old Russian monarchs and bled out and died while the other queen was still dying of AIDS, saying, Ethel, I need some water. That's what they found her like 3 days later. So like, yeah, the gruesome and heroin killed John Holder. John Holder was Jackie Curtis. Like the big three trans drag people were Jackie Curtis, Candy Darling, and Holly Woodlawn. Like I did shows. I saw John Holder. In fact, I saw Jackie Curtis the day he died, shooting up heroin in the building where Madonna used to live on 4th Street in Avenue B. And I did shows with Holly Woodlawn, with these guys who they later went on to produce Hairspray, the musical, and everything. Yeah.
oh. Well, I
Mm.
think it's like beautiful how you sort of like weave the history and the tragedy or the trauma with all of this sort of like with fantasy and with like sort of like the whimsical and carnival, and so that you can receive like some very difficult messages but in a container of something that has a lot of joy, right?
Yes, yes,
um
definitely. You nailed it. Uh-huh. Yeah,
So
that's it.
how do you feel like your art like intersects with the present moment? Like you said that you don't like really follow the news, but you're acutely aware, through your work it shows. So
I'm
like
glad that they, I mean, with the current political state of the music, like it's interesting. Like my show opened before you know who took over. So luckily, I'm thinking, are they going to come in and storm the galleries and tear my stuff down because it's too queer centric? No, they're not going to come to New York City. Who knows? I don't.
right. Right. I mean I'm wondering like what this particular administration means for the art world because I mean they're cutting back on everything. Do you think it's going to have like a huge impact on artists?
Well, as far as I'm concerned. the government, I never got money from the government to do anything. So it's like
Hmm.
everyone in my generation, like even like trans girls, they had to get that. It was all bootleg hormones, you know. As an artist, you had to get your art materials wherever you could find them. It's never so as far as it's sad that I mean, it was always fun to see those like when they perform at the like I grew up with like Jackie Kennedy when they would have like Pablo Casals would perform at the I don't think anyone is going to perform at the White House. It's not going to be like a big cultural thing. He doesn't uh,
Yeah, I mean, but I think
and
like the crackdown on immigration, the crackdown on like civil rights, the crackdown against women, the stuff about like housing and everything.
I think
Um,
that's not gonna stop me or anyone else from being who they are. I really don't.
and-
I think, to me, I thought, who did it say? Who's that guy who started Kinky Boots? Whom I have friends who produced the show I did with Hollywood Law. They wrote the play, the Broadway play Kinky Boots, and he was saying just me being alive is a political statement at this point. Me
Amen.
just
Ashe.
existing and being myself truly is a political statement. You know,
Well,
like
I think that, also people, I think from your generation, from my generation, because we came through so much that like there is this survival kind of like mechanism that says
oh,
like make work under any condition, and so that, I mean, would you say that your work is an act of resistance?
well, I'm not resisting anything. They don't come from me.
Hmm.
It was it always well, maybe it was a bold statement of who I was at the time. I mean, when I started making art like this in 1980, that was only 10 years after Stonewall, like that was pretty close, And so I was always just like, I like guys, I like girls, to dress up as girls, you know what I mean? And girls can be, I'm all with the lesbianism, I'm all with the trans people. I've always had friends of every, you're talking about the civil rights, all my first early boyfriends were all black. I remember, so I've had many, everything. I just love it all. In the world I came from and or still come from, it's never been misogynist or racist or homophobic or classist. It's always been very inclusive in the world art world I know, So is they gonna really kind of stop that? I don't think they can stop us from being who we are, I don't think so.
I think that's a powerful affirmation. So I guess, we're moving to the close. I have like a million things to ask you, but like one, um, what's next in terms of like your personal goals, your goals as an artist, and then like what do you want people to take away from the work? And I also wanted to say congratulations, to have this like incredible show of like your work and yeah, it's really powerful and it contains so much, that's so important to the city, that's important to individuals. So what's next, and what do you want people to take away from the work?
Well, just last night I went to my first opera, and I'm like, ooh, what if they called me to do sets for the opera, big backdrops for the opera? Ooh. I saw those Marc Chagall paintings, and I'm like, well, somebody's going to do the backdrops. Why not call me? And I've been working with I've been recently working with Valentino, the designer. I've done a lot of work with a lot of big designers and art. I have many more art shows. I'm still painting up a storm. As we speak, I have some things in the San Francisco Art Fair. Um, it's great. I think a lot of people are coming here and saying, wow, thank you for still being alive. I'm so glad you're presenting all this stuff. Like we aren't being erased. We are here.
Mhm.
They used to say, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. But yeah, it's funny with did you know I was actually on Donald Trump's Celebrity Apprentice? I,
No, tell
I
us
was on
about
the
that.
episode with Joan Rivers. Yeah, Joan
I
Rivers.
actually really like Joan Rivers, by
I
the way.
love Joan Rivers. And in fact, we all worked for free because all our money was donated to God's Love We Deliver, where they would, where they give free food to all the people dying of AIDS that can't get out of the house and shop, and also Seeing Eye Dogs for the Blind. Yeah, it was a funny thing. Like, she had to do a celebrity auction to win the show, and because she's so bold and brazen and truthful and funny, like myself, A lot of people are like, I'm not going to donate anything. She said I look like a troll on the red carpet, you know. So she had all her friends who did drag or anything. Why don't you show up as celebrities? So I showed up as like a 1970s Cher. I remember seeing Ivanka on the set, and she's looking at me going, "Who are you supposed to be, Marilyn Manson?" So,
Oh, goodness.
but Joan won. She won. Yep. And then they used the clips of us on the Today Show on Good Morning America. Yeah. I've done a lot of things. I performed at Yankee Stadium for the gay games. In a lot of museums. Here's this one of all these different costumes. I did so many shows. I still do so many shows. Like this was just in like 3 months. Every day it was a different show.
And there's a tremendous body of work. You have
Oh yeah.
like, yeah, I mean,
Well, I
this is
never.
the
Well,
early work. So what do we have in terms of like
well,
the
I have.
present?
Well, I haven't moved out of my studio apartment um, in 45 years. So nothing to throw up. So a lot of people move, and when you move, you say, I'm getting rid of that couch. I don't want it anymore. I don't need these sweaters. I'm gonna get rid, art supplies. It didn't sell the first time, get rid of it. I never got rid of it. And I also always uh destiny. I always knew I was going to be a huge international art star. Always. I knew it from the very beginning. So it wasn't like I gotta push, push, push. I knew it was going to happen.
Mm.
So I kept things, I'll keep, like for instance, when I did the portrait of Keith Haring, I'll give you $20 for it. And at that time, trust me, I could have used $20. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna need this for my retrospective."
What?
I was thinking that in my early 20s. Is that uh I don't know. And it's not even being full of myself. I just like knew like somebody's going to do it. Why not me be the voice of a generation? And many people say, "Oh yeah, you're the best of your generation." Because maybe just because I keep going. A lot of people give
Mm,
up. Being
mm.
an artist or being a poet or a musician or an actor. Once you hit 27, they're like, okay, get a job at an ice cream shop, scooping ice cream, And but like I'm gonna keep doing it. And I keep doing it. And I've sold things lately. I think because of the turn of events of COVID or the right wing, they're opening up, especially the art world and the magazines. They're like, let's open up to all these people that didn't have a voice. Like, let's give them a voice now. Why not? What do we got to lose?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we share that kind of like that grit, that making art at whatever cost and not letting other things, outside things, sort of define us or stop us. And we didn't talk about something that's like really important to me is that I really love like how you incorporate text into your paintings and it's very natural. And I mean, it's interesting, like, and you move like very seamlessly between mediums and like so it's not when I first started making visual art, I guess it was like 10 years ago, even though I was always like collecting and stuff like that. And people were, all my friends are visual artists, and they were like, "You're not new, you're a text-based artist." And I was horrified, right? And because I didn't want to be pigeonholed. And I love that like you incorporate text, but it's not self-conscious. It's not saying, "Oh, I'm a text-based artist." It's just kind of naturally there. Um, can you speak to that?
Well, one of my big influences when I was a kid was Mad Magazine. I don't think they have that anymore, but it was like cartoons with kooky drawings and lots of words, words and kooky and like balloons, like a cartoon with words and things. So, and also like album covers. I loved album. I'm a huge vinyl. I have thousands of vinyl records, tens of thousands. So there's always like there'd be an art piece, but then there'd also be incorporated the name of the band or the name of the album. So it's always not a strange thing to put words, with the thing. And that's why a lot of my words they're very curvy and they move with the shapes of whatever they might be around. And so it's again, very natural for the words to come in and out of the pieces of artwork.
Um, is there anything that you've written or that you said that like stands out in your mind that you want to be like remembered by, like just like a quote, something that's like, very much you. Like, what's your favorite quote?
Well, I like to do this funny thing where I say, if I'm known for anything, and then it's dot, 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 and I fill it in. Like, oh, if I'm known for anything, it's my snow paintings. Or I'll say, if I'm known for anything, it's my body odor. Or if I'm known for anything, it's my calligraphic line. Or if I'm known for anything, like that's a funny thing, because you have to be known for something. I'm known, I do so many things, but people, like you said, want to pigeonhole you. So I think it's funny to say, if I'm known for anything, of course, because of that movie, I did a Hollywood movie called Wigstock the movie, and in it, I'm rapping a song called "It's Natural." So a lot of times I'll post things, and people will say it's natural, so they use that. Yeah, I guess it's better to be a one-hit wonder than a no-hit wonder. But if you put one thing, if you're gonna put one thing out there, people they remember it. But even that,
Um,
35 years.
if we're looking at this slide right now, I'm actually reminded of Pope Al, the late Pope Al. And did you know their work?
Who is this Pope Al?
Pope L. William
Pope?
Popel, and they did installations, and they did a series of paintings called the skin drawings, and they were sort of like nonsensical text, and it was like "Black people are the window of the world" or something like that. Orange people, eat lollipops, but it was kind of like making fun of skin, and so just and race. So anyway, just like looking at this particular slide reminds me of Pope L, who, I guess died like a year ago, 2 years ago, and they were like a really incredible artist who did installation, who also wrote, and all of these things. And so I think that we're probably segueing into the Q&A.
Ooh,
So is that true?
as long as
Yeah.
it's a Q and
Yes.
on, we don't want to
We
say.
Q&A. So yeah, I mean, I just want to say like congratulations. I'm really happy that that your exhibits are there, multiple, and that we'll see more of them. And I know that it's not easy, you know what I mean? And like even though you make it look easy, it's not easy, that basically it takes a lot of grit, it takes a lot of vision, it takes a lot of personal power to keep like putting your work out in the world and to be recognized for it. So congratulations from me.
Oh, thank you, Pamela. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tabu and Pamela, for this conversation, which has been a pleasure to listen to. We have several questions ready to go to ask you, Tabu, if you'll take them. The first one is going to be from GE. GE, I'll give you the chance to unmute.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Thank you, Pamela, and thank you, Tabboo, for all the years of joy. Um, I first, of course, I almost wanted to ask you about the celebrity apprentice appearance with Cher, but I'd really rather know about how you believe painting is spiritual and also kind of a meditation.
Well, first of all, I usually paint when I wake up in the morning. My cat wakes me up at like 4, 5, or 6 in the morning. So after I feed my cat, that's usually when I do my art. And it's usually in the nude. I live alone. So I'm in my studio. So it's just me, a lot of times just quietly painting. So it's meditation, and like I'll play all those, like I told you, I have thousands of albums. So I'll play music, just music, me meditating. That's my spiritual practice, like, and by myself, and then I send it out to the world. Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you. Ooh, that's full. Sorry, my phone is going. Oh, hearts. Was that you?
Thank you for your question, GE. The next question is going to be from Magli. Magli, I'll pass the mic over to you to ask.
Hi, Tabboo. Thank you so much. This was such an illuminating conversation. At the beginning, you said history is told by people who's outlived it, and that I really love that quote. And thank you for sharing so many stories with us. I was wondering what motivates you, seeing that you've been in the art and performance scene for so long and you've seen it go through so many changes. How do you continue to wake up and paint first thing in the morning?
Uh, how and what? I think that's just who I am. It's just who I am. You know what I mean? Like, Why do I wake up and use my left hand? Because I'm left-handed, I don't know. I like it. I'm especially now. I mean, I just turned 66, so I should be retired and say, I don't need this anymore. I could just, you know, granted, they're cutting Medicare and Social Security, so I need to keep working. But I'm lucky that I'm having almost a fourth stage of my career happening. So why in the world would I want to give up? There's a famous saying, strike while the iron's hot. Or, what did they used to say in Project Runway? One day you're in, the next day you're out. And, I could be out tomorrow. So I want to be there to spread my love and joy, to teach the children, to make the money, to live happy and joyous and free while I can. Yeah. So
So,
that's my
I just wanted to jump in and ask you if you had any questions, because you mentioned the internet and how that sort of like changed the world. Can you hear me?
yes, yes.
And then I was wondering if you had any like opinions about AI and art.
Yeah, I don't even it's like I'll be seeing something and say, oh, look at the firefighters rescuing the deer in the California firefighters. And they'll be like, that's AI, that's not even real. I'm like, really? It's so realistic. Or they'll show like fishermen rescuing polar bears up in the Arctic Sea. And they're like, that's not even real. That's AI. Like polar bears would eat that fisherman. I'm like, wow, it's so realistic. As far as computer, like I can barely work my cell phone. So I don't know if that's going to influence me and how I can make art. Uh, I do. A lot of people don't even do they call the cell phone a gadget. Oh, I don't use that gadget. I believe in, I'm alive now, so this is what the technology is now, so I'm aware of it. I like it. When the internet came, a lot of people, if you didn't have like some young kid who could figure out to digitalize all your old photos or whatever your movies, or take all those VHS tapes and turn them into CDs, and then the CD went out, and you had to take the CDs and turn them into a digital file, and then that went out, so you had to take it's so hard to keep up with all that stuff. But a lot of it was lost. Like I lost a computer once and all the old photos and all, it's like, so all that's gone to time. But I mean, I'm not think I'm that important. You look at the world and there'll be like an aerial view of like people in China, and there's like 50 million people. There were 50 million people need to keep everything they ever made. Like, I'm not that important. I'm glad that people are paying attention to me, but I'm just one of a gazillion people who have live now, or will live tomorrow. And I'm just making the most of it right now.
Thank you for those questions, Pamela and Magli. I'm going to ask two last questions, if I may. One is for both Pamela and Tabboo. Um, as you're both performers, I'm curious whether performing is something that has impacted your visual arts practice and made you think differently about composition and form and space, or if you think of them as separate strands of expression and aspects to the way you create.
Well, for me, okay, and I have to do like my little plug about, or my big plug, about Big Mama Thornton, my musical, show at Joe's Pub, which is coming up on February 28th, and it's one night only, and that's where I pay tribute to the mother of rock and roll, the queer mother, and I say queer instead of gay because we don't know. Uh, so anyway, but interestingly enough, that the more fascinated I became with Big Mama Thornton, and it came from like watching sort of like tapes at night and watching the way that she was moving and singing. And I was like, oh, I can do that. Oh, I understand where she's moving from, right? And so I formed this like connection. and then interestingly enough, like the other way around, then I started painting her and rendering her in like a lot of different, forms. And like I did a show at Kate's Ferry. It was a group show. There were three of us. And basically I depicted all, and it was during Gay Pride Month, and I depicted all the queer blues singers, right? So Bessie Smith, so Big Mama Thornton. Who else? There were a couple more. I can't think of them offhand. And I actually feel like, I mean, it was interesting because I took a performance class, and they were attributing like the first performance to like these like white women like in Europe or something. And I was like, what about the blues singers, And it's like they were doing queer performance at the top of the century, you know what I mean? And so I think not enough credit is given. And so I basically render them. I render them in watercolor. I render them in different forms. And then also similarly with my friends like Lost to AIDS, I basically also render them in watercolor because I don't think a lot of those guys have ever been depicted in the gallery. So there's, I mean, through photographs, yes, but Donald Woods or Essex Hempel or Asado Saint, like all of those poets, I render in watercolor. I've also rendered the people that were murdered at Top Supermarket because I don't really feel like by a white supremacist, and because I don't really feel that they get represented. So I guess I'm saying everything is like working together, you know. Yeah.
Well, with me, I would say, like a lot of times when I film some scenes with some of my actors in my movies, they're like, "Oh, you do my makeup. Paint me like you paint some of those portraits you do, very bold and German expressionistic or whatever, So I would say that as far as my visual, my performance with my 2D art, it's always been mixed. It's always together. They all inform each other.
Thank you both for those answers. My last question, Tabboo, you kind of started to go this direction, but I'm curious, um, what a day in the studio is like for you. I mean, do you start by drawing? Do you start by painting? What is your daily practice relative to the works that are on view in the show?
Well, I never do any preparative thing except thinking maybe a color. Like I'll think, oh, I'll do lavender and black. Like I'll think something like that. And then I make sure I have those paints. And then I just start. And I don't know, so I never do a prepared drawing or I'm really what is that, like a Zen or something? I just very Asian, like just start and stop. You just start until you're done. It's usually all in one sitting, so never more than a day, really. I rarely come back to something unless I have some really intricate ground that needs to dry so I can put something on top of it. But otherwise, I start and then I just go. It's like like a meditation thing. I'll just start, go, and when I'm done, I know I'm done. I'm like, okay, that's done.
Do
Are
you
you
listen?
working, sorry, are you working in acrylics mainly or
Yes,
oil?
always acrylic, yes, because again, it's fast. I can't wait around for 3 weeks for it to dry. I need it to be dry within minutes because I'm on to the next thing. I'm very fast thinking, freestyle, or freewheeling, or whatever. Always acrylic. I remember in the 70s when I was in art school, I was taught oil painting, but then I realized acrylic painting was the new thing and it's quick and easy and fast. And so I've been painting in acrylic all the time. I love it. Yeah.
Do you listen to music while you paint?
Either in my head, the thing is I have all the music's in my head anyway, so I don't even really need the headphones. I can just have it in my head all the time, going all the time anyway. But I do like music, yes. Music, just, yes, I love music.
And so do you perceive most of your work as installation?
As an installation?
As installations, yeah.
No, I never even think of like curating the gallery of what it's going to look like.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
never. No, no, no. I mean, half the time that's not even part of my job in this art world. I make the paintings. They'll pick out what paintings they think will go in the show, and that's why I've loosened up and let them do their part. I'm lucky with two galleries that are really, really smart, really, really chic, and really, really. So that's two of the most important things I think that I want to be around people that are chic and smart. So I let them deal with it. And so far, like I might come in thinking, oh, they better use that painting, or they better use that. But a lot of times they'll already know the paintings I want, and they'll set it up in a way that's way chicer than I could think of, because that's really not I'm not,
And so, sorry, are you represented by Gordon Robichaux?
yes, and Karma. Yeah,
Okay, wow. Beautiful. So you have a dual like representation? That's amazing.
Yeah, that's how I would say, like when I get my retrospective, I want it to be in the Met, the Guggenheim, the Whitney, the Jewish Museum, and the Brooklyn Museum all simultaneously.
Wow.
Like I want everyone's like, oh no, everyone owns everything. I'm like, come on, we can all be friends together, and that together we can, especially in the cultural world, in a world that wants to not have a cultural world. It just is a cold business world. I like to bring everyone together in a cultural way. So for me to have two, that's two more, that's not many more people working with me on my behalf. And they get along great.
That's like amazing. And I didn't really mention like Gordon Robichaux, who I'm familiar with. I'm not as familiar with Karma, but Sam and who's the other
Jacob,
person? Gordon?
Jacob.
Jacob. Okay.
Everyone
And
thinks Gordon Robichaux is one person. No, Sam Gordon and
okay,
Jacob
okay, all
Robichaux,
right.
two people.
Right. Okay. And those guys are really like fantastic. Do you feel like it's their vision that's like contributed to your success? Their
Oh,
vision, their support.
yes, they've been very supportive. Yes, yes, yes. There was a moment in time where I thought everything was going, and suddenly they came, boom, and they go, oh, and boom, they're very helped. Oh yeah, give it up to Sam and Jacob
Yay!
and Brendan and his team. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well,
So,
Any more
sorry.
questions from the public out there?
I think that's all for our questions today.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
That
My
concludes our.
show, I just want to tell everyone my show is up until the end of February at both galleries. So pop on by and see for yourself.
I just want to say, on behalf of all of us at the Rail, thank you so much, Pamela and Tabboo, for this conversation, which has been a pleasure to listen to. Thank you, especially to Katie and to Sam, Katie at Karma and Sam at Gordon Robichaux, for helping prepare everything for today. Those images were amazing and so great to be able to look at during the conversation. I'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art, who sponsors the New Social Environment Program and makes conversations like this one possible. They also support our archive, where this video will be shortly. And if you're free on Monday at 1 p.m., join us for a conversation with Kelty Ferris, Arturo Herrera, and Martha Joseph on the occasion of the grand gesture at Sycamore Molloy Jenkins. And as is Rail tradition, you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so, so much for joining us this Friday afternoon, and take care, everybody.
Thank you.
yay!
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Taboo.
Thank you so much, Pamela.
Yay!
Thank you,
So
Thank
much.
Taboo.
you.
Chloe.
Good to see
Great
you,
conversation,
Taboo.
Pamela.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank
all
you.
right.
Congrats, Taboo.
Woo!
Congratulations.
Go see the show, everybody. Woo!
Absolutely. I'm gonna make my way
Gracias.
there. All
Can't
right.
wait. Me too, Pamela.
All right.